She was flickering out, drained by a powerful magic she couldn't control. The man who found her was King Lucien, the powerful, isolated ruler of Eldoria. What she didn't know was that her existence was the only thing that could break the 1,000-year-old curse that bound him, a secret that would shock every vampire in the city. The mist in Eldoria didn't fall. It clung, a cold, velvet shroud over the city that King Lucien had commanded for 5 centuries. He moved with silent, regal impatience through the lower quarters, his dark, expensive cloak contrasting sharply with the crumbling, filth-ridden streets. His council believed his presence here was a waste of a king's power, but Lucien was seeking a lost magical focus, a key to ending the emotional numbness caused by the shadow pact that bound him to his throne. A sudden, sharp scent sliced through the cold air, not the metallic tang of blood, but the sterile odor of ozone and dying light. It was an energy signature that didn't belong in his world, a power he was compelled to investigate. Lucien moved with silent speed, following the impossible scent into an alley so narrow the perpetual gloom deepened to absolute black. There, crumpled near a leaking dumpster, was a young woman. Miranda. She was terrifyingly still, her skin luminous with an unnatural pallor, her simple white dress, matching the image, clinging to her slight frame. She was not beaten by men, but consumed by something invisible, powerful, and magical. He knelt, the unfamiliar heat of the dying light burning his palm. Her eyes, wide and glazed, flickered open. "Stop," she rasped, her voice a ghost of sound. "It burns. It will burn you." Ignoring her warning, Lucien reached out to check her fading pulse. As his cold skin made contact with her frantic warmth, he felt the violent magical flux, and then he saw it, a faint, almost invisible sigil etched onto her collarbone. The delicate, stylized lines of the sun rune, the forbidden, thought to be extinct mark of the sun seers. His centuries of isolation vanished in a single, paralyzing instant of recognition. This girl was the key to his prison. "I don't care what you are," he whispered, his own ancient power flaring in response. He slid his arm beneath her, lifting her fragile weight as if she were spun glass. "You are coming with me. If you burn, we will burn together." The decision was made. The king had taken the one thing the entire vampire court was sworn to extinguish. "Hi, my amazing family. Thank you for sticking around with me through our trying times. I really appreciate your love and support. We're finally back again to give you many more beautiful stories. If you're already hooked in for today's story and ready to enjoy it, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one, and you don't want to miss it. Now let's continue. The king's private wing of the Obsidian Palace was a sanctuary of calculated darkness, built to absorb every stray ray of light and sound from the miserable city outside. The chamber Lucien carried Miranda into was colder than a crypt, draped in heavy black velvets, its air smelling faintly of ancient parchment and ozone. He laid her on a low, velvet-covered chaise, not a bed, but a luxurious slab meant for temporary rest. He moved with a precision born of centuries, his movements devoid of any wasted motion. His first task was to examine the damage. The magical drain was accelerating. The sun rune on her collarbone was no longer faint. It was a microscopic pinprick of light, desperately trying to draw power where there was none left. This was not a job for a physician. This was a task for a king who held the secrets of life and death, and who had just made a choice that could cost him his crown. Lucien sliced his own wrist with a ceremonial silver dagger. The action was swift, practiced, and deeply ritualistic. The blood that welled up was not ordinary. It was his purified, dense venom, rarely shared and reserved only for the conversion of elite warriors. To give it to a human was beyond forbidden. It was an admission of ultimate intent. He pressed his wrist to Miranda's lips, forcing a few drops past her chapped, pale skin. The moment the venom, pure and cold, touched the energy-starved light of the sun rune, Miranda convulsed. A searing, blinding pulse of golden light erupted from her, shattering the glass of a delicate antique vase across the room. Lucien recoiled, clutching his own chest, the purifying light agonizing to his shadow-bound core. The bonding was complete. The venom healed the mystical drain instantly, flooding her empty vessel with ancient, immortal life force. Miranda gasped, eyes snapping open, dilated and dark with the shock of her transformation. She didn't know the full extent of the change, but she felt it, the violent, burning energy now stabilizing into a powerful, swirling current beneath her skin. She looked at the regal, dark figure looming over her, his face a mask of cold, chiseled perfection, and realized he was not a mere rescuer. He was the source of her chaos. "What did you do?" she whispered, trying to rise. Her muscles, seconds ago weak and useless, now surged with unfamiliar strength. The sun rune glowed faintly on her skin, now visible to the naked eye. Lucien stared at her, his usual mask of indifference momentarily cracked by a raw, ancient recognition that defied his own logic. "I saved you, Miranda," he said, the name tasting foreign and precious on his tongue. "You were dying. And I will not tolerate the death of what is mine." "Mine?" Miranda scrambled backward against the chaise's headboard. "I belong to no one. I ran for my whole life just to be free. What are you? A monster in a velvet cage." Before Lucien could respond, the heavy, double-reinforced door to the chamber was thrown open with violent force. Lord Valerius, Lucien's prime advisor, a vampire whose face was a study in aristocratic disdain, and whose ambition was rumored to rival the king's own, stood framed in the doorway, two heavily armored guards flanking him. Valerius's eyes were immediately drawn to Miranda's collarbone, where the faint but undeniable gold light of the sun rune pulsed beneath her thin skin. Valerius's voice was a chilling silk. "Treason. High King Lucien, you have violated the first edict. To harbor a human marked with the sigil of the cleansing light, a sun seer, is an abomination. By the Pact of Shadows, you are harboring a weapon designed to destroy us." Lucien stepped forward, shielding Miranda with his body, his gaze burning with cold fire. "Silence, Valerius. This human is under the direct protection of the Noctis King. Leave." Valerius sneered, his control slipping. "Protection? You have given her your venom, haven't you? I smell the mixing of our essences. You have risked the stability of the entire kingdom for a street urchin who bears the sign of our annihilation. The court demands she be executed, and you, sire, must face judgment for your profound weakness." Miranda's breath hitched. She looked at the powerful, beautiful king who had saved her, and then at the ruthless advisor ready to tear her apart. Her choice had brought her from one alley into a battle for an entire kingdom, and the strange, burning power inside her was ready to explode. Lord Valerius's sneer tightened into a mask of righteous fury. The scent of Lucien's purified venom, a king's essence, mixed with the raw, untamed light of the sun rune was an intoxicating insult to everything the Shadow Pact represented. "Your protection is meaningless, sire," Valerius hissed. "The edict states that any human bearing the cleansing mark must be extinguished to maintain the equilibrium of the pact. I will not stand by while you commit suicide and destabilize Eldoria." Lucien did not raise his voice, yet the air in the chamber pressed down with crushing force. "You presume to invoke the pact against your king, Valerius? You will remember your place." He took a single, slow step toward his advisor. "You will leave this chamber, you will forget this human exists, and you will wait for my summons." Valerius hesitated, measuring the centuries of fear Lucien commanded against the opportunity of a lifetime. The power was there for the taking, yet the king's cold eyes promised instantaneous ruin. Valerius gave a mocking low bow. "As you command, sire. But know this. The court and those who truly serve the shadow will not forget. You have made an enemy of the light you embrace and the darkness you rule." Valerius pivoted sharply, his guards retreating. The heavy door slammed shut, but the silence he left behind was poisoned with imminent betrayal. Lucien turned back to Miranda, his expression rigid. He is ambitious. He will not wait. We have hours, perhaps a day, before the political maneuvering begins. Miranda wasn't listening. Her gaze was fixed on the silver dagger Lucien had used, the same dagger now pulsing with a faint residual light. She raised her hand. The sun rune on her collarbone throbbed, and suddenly, the residual light intensified, causing the dagger to rapidly heat and buckle. It wasn't healing, it was purifying the silver to an atomic state, nearly melting it. I can't stop it, she gasped, pulling her hand away as the dagger dropped to the carpet, smoking. It's been like this since I woke up. It burns, and I don't know why, or how to turn it off. Lucien quickly moved to the far side of the room. The venom has bonded you to the pack's magic, he explained, watching the dagger cool into a warped puddle. You are now a conduit, but you are not trained. You are a lightning rod of ancient energy. Miranda scrambled off the chaise, her powerful new legs propelling her to the wall. She felt caged, hunted, and now dangerously unstable. I need to leave, she pleaded, tears welling up not from pain, but from sheer terror of the force inside her. I have to leave. I've been running my whole life, since I was a child. Every time I get close to someone or somewhere, things start breaking. I am no one. Just an orphan. Let me go before I break your whole world. You are no orphan, Lucien countered, his voice steadying the chaos. He crossed the chamber, keeping a careful 3 paces away. Your bloodline is older than this palace. The Sun Seers were not merely human. They were the key to the balance, the human counterbalance to the raw darkness of the Noctis line. He walked to a hidden shelf and retrieved a massive, iron-bound tome, laying it open on a pedestal. The pages were brittle, covered in the glyphs of an extinct language. This is not a prophecy. It is a historical record, Lucien said, tracing a glyph. A Sun Seer was supposed to stand by the king's side, channeling the day's power to temper the Noctis king's shadow, allowing us to rule with sanity. When the pact was forged, the Sun Seers were hunted to extinction by those who feared balance, the ones who preferred perpetual night and unchecked power. They feared the light because it could challenge the king. And the sun rune? Miranda whispered, touching the burning mark on her skin. It is a magical failsafe. It is the key, the switch, the one thing that can shatter the pact and dissolve the curse that binds me. They didn't extinguish your line completely, Miranda. They drove it into hiding, ensuring that if you ever surfaced, you would be a threat to the stability of the entire vampire world. A deafening crash ripped through the silence of the outer palace wing. Not a door slamming, but the sound of stone shattering. Lucien's head snapped up, his golden eyes narrowed to slits. Treason accelerates quickly, he bit out. That was not Valerius. That was the Obsidian Order. He was already moving, stripping the heavy velvet curtains from the windows and pulling them over the lights. The Order of the Obsidian Blade, fanatics who crave the absolute darkness of the pact. They believe the king is weak and that the existence of a Sun Seer is blasphemy. The outer door of the chamber shuddered violently. A sound like grinding teeth followed, then a metallic scraping. Assassins, Lucien confirmed, his hand drawing a long, wickedly sharp blade from beneath his coat. He looked at Miranda, now trembling, the sun rune flaring in rhythm with the scraping at the door. They will kill you and then me. You need to understand this. I saved you, not for virtue, but for destiny. But if you trust me, I can get you out. I know a place no vampire would ever dare to follow. The door splintered. Through the gap, a sliver of darkness moved fast, fluid, armed with a shadow-forged dagger. The assassination attempt had begun. Lucien moved with blurring speed, intercepting the blow just as Miranda's sun rune pulsed, sending a surge of heat that made the shadow dagger smoke on contact with Lucien's blade. They had to leave, immediately, before the combined light and shadow attracted the entire Obsidian Order. The single obsidian blade assassin was dealt with swiftly, Lucien's ceremonial sword proving lethal in his hand. But the splintered door was a herald, not the full threat. More shadows were converging on the private wing, drawn by the clash of steel and the unstable light emanating from Miranda. "The archives are useless now," Lucien commanded, gripping Miranda's arm. The touch of her sun rune, still smoking the metal of his own skin, was a necessary agony. "We must take the Elder Tunnels. They are too unstable and too full of residual light for the Obsidian Order to use without burning themselves out." He pulled her toward the massive, black marble fireplace. With a complicated twist of a hidden sigil carved into the mantelpiece, the back of the hearth slid open, revealing a vertical shaft plunging into absolute darkness. Miranda hesitated, peering down. "Tunnels? Where do they lead?" "Away from the darkness of the court, toward the ancient secrets of the crown," Lucien replied, pushing her gently but firmly onto a small, grinding platform. "The Obsidian Order wants you dead because your light is uncontrolled. Valerius wants me dethroned because I broke the rules for you. We are targets for the entire kingdom." The platform descended, carrying them into a vast, intricate network of forgotten passageways. The air here was damp and smelled of ozone and long-dead magic. The walls were lined with smooth, black stone, etched with glyphs Miranda couldn't decipher. "The Sun Seers built these tunnels," Lucien explained, keeping his voice low as they stepped off the platform. "They were the conduits between my human ancestors and the first Noctis kings. They're infused with light magic, which is why the modern court, bound by the Shadow Pact, avoids them." The tunnels were a maze, but Lucien seemed to rely on instinct rather than memory. However, at a junction where 4 identical passages met, he stopped, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his rigid features. "The paths shift," he muttered, consulting a faint map etched into the stone. "The magic is too old." Miranda stepped forward. The sun rune on her collarbone thrummed, and the glyphs on the walls surrounding the western passage began to glow a faint, soothing gold. It felt like a deep, ancient familiarity, a pull toward the safety of the light. "That way," Miranda said, pointing. "I don't know how, but I know that way is less suffocating." Lucien studied her, a flicker of grim approval in his eyes. The venom had not just healed her, it had awakened her Sun Seer core, allowing her to sense the ebb and flow of their ancient light magic. "The instinct of your ancestors. A powerful gift." As they moved through the correct path, the silence between them was replaced by the low thrum of her burgeoning power. Miranda finally found the courage to ask the question that burned hotter than the rune on her skin. "You said the Shadow Pact bound you. What is it, truly? Why does saving me risk your kingdom?" They paused beside a subterranean waterfall that plunged into an unseen depth, its sound masking their voices. Lucien leaned against the wall, the effort of guarding his own essence against her light draining him visibly. "The Shadow Pact is my crown and my prison," he confessed, his voice heavy with centuries of weariness. 1,000 years ago, to end the great war between the human empires and the immortal Noctis line, my ancestor sacrificed his humanity. He forged a pact with a primordial shadow entity. He lifted his hand, summoning a tiny, cold flicker of raw shadow magic in his palm. It was immense power, but utterly sterile. The pact granted the Noctis line absolute dominion and immortality, but at a price: the eternal suppression of our human emotionality. We became creatures of pure, calculated control and eternal night. We were physically unable to endure the full light of the sun, and more importantly, unable to feel genuine human connection, lest our power be destabilized. Miranda stared at the shadow in his hand, a chilling realization settling over her. "So the Shadow Pact makes you powerful, but keeps you emotionally empty." "It makes me a king, not a man," he agreed, extinguishing the shadow. "The pact is anchored to a colossal artifact deep within the ancient citadel. And your sun rune, it is the magical solvent." the only known force that can shatter that artifact and dissolve the entire curse. If the pact shatters, Miranda asked, her voice trembling, what happens to you? Do you die? Lucian met her gaze, his expression completely impassive. I do not know. The prophecies are unclear. I could be destroyed by the flood of light, or I could be transformed into something unknown. But I know this. The pact has made us safe but miserable. And I am tired of ruling misery. I am gambling the future of Eldoria on the chance that your light will bring balance, not annihilation. They heard the chilling scrape of iron on stone nearby. The Obsidian Order had found a way to bypass the tunnel traps. They had been discovered. We have wasted enough time on conversation, Lucian said, his tone turning instantly sharp. The citadel is close. Move, Miranda. Let your son's seer guide you, because they are right behind us. The pursuit was relentless. The Obsidian Order, desperate to prevent the sun's seer from reaching her destiny, pressed hard behind them in the tunnels. Lucian moved with the savage grace of a cornered beast, using calculated bursts of shadow energy to collapse false passages and slow their pursuers. Miranda, meanwhile, was their only true compass, her sun rune burning against her chest, guiding them instinctively toward the most powerful residual sources of light. After what felt like hours of frantic, scrambling movement, the black, damp stone of the tunnels gave way to a rough-hewn passage of granite. A faint, distant glimmer of natural light appeared ahead, a sight that should have been a sign of safety to any human, but which made the ancient king beside her tense with pain. We are at the exit, Lucian muttered, his face pale and drawn. The final barrier is ahead. The citadel was built on a peak, exposed fully to the day. But you can't walk in the sun, Miranda whispered, remembering his explanation of the Shadow Pact. I won't have to. The seers built a shadow bridge, a temporary reprieve. But hurry. The Obsidian Order will risk the light to stop us now. They broke out of the tunnel mouth onto a sheer cliff face. Ahead of them, across a terrifying drop, stood the ruin of the ancient citadel. It was a desolate, magnificent structure of pale, sun-bleached stone, its roof partially collapsed, allowing the harsh light of the midday sun to flood its courtyards. It looked like the skeletal remains of a forgotten god. Lucian reached into his inner coat pocket and withdrew a small, polished piece of obsidian, the only raw shadow material he kept on his person. He hurled it across the chasm. The obsidian impacted the nearest wall of the citadel and instantly unleashed a thin, shimmering tendril of dark energy that stretched back to the tunnel mouth, forming a barely visible, temporary bridge. Go. Do not look down, and do not stop, Lucian ordered, pushing her onto the precarious platform. The moment Miranda stepped onto the shadow bridge, the full, unfiltered power of the midday sun hit her. It was not painful, but overwhelming, a magnificent, raw energy that poured into her sun rune. Her entire being felt instantly stabilized, energized, and deeply right. She felt the truth of her bloodline for the first time. Lucian followed quickly, but the journey was torturous. The light was agony to him, making his shadow-bound essence hiss and crackle. He reached the other side and collapsed, leaning against the sun-baked stone, his breathing shallow. This place, it is sanctuary for you, he managed, his voice strained. And hell for me. Miranda looked at him, seeing the king stripped of his regal facade, reduced to a wounded creature by the very thing that sustained her. She knelt beside him, instinctively placing her hand on his arm. The sun rune's energy, now stable, did not burn him instantly, but created a faint, cool shield between them. Rest here, she said, her voice now calm and steady. The sun was clearing her mind. I will explore. I need to know what to do next. Lucian only nodded, unable to summon the strength to argue. Miranda walked into the vast, sun-drenched courtyard. The light here felt like a physical presence, wrapping around her like a protective cloak. She found a ruinous central chamber where the remains of a great altar stood. The air around the altar thrummed with ancient, concentrated light magic. Embedded in the altar, preserved through millennia, was a large ancestral tablet covered in the same glyphs as the tunnels, but accompanied by clear pictograms. It depicted a king and a sun seer entwined, the sun seer holding the sun rune over the king's heart, while a colossal obsidian cage, the shadow-packed artifact, crumbled around them. The final glyphs, translated by the sudden, inherited knowledge in her mind, spoke not of a curse, but a ritual. To shatter the cage, blood must accept the light. The sun seer must give what is demanded freely. If the king is weak, the bond will break. If the king is worthy, he shall transform. The meaning was clear. The ritual required a direct, intentional act of union, a willing sacrifice of her power and, likely, her human blood, fused with the venom in his veins. It was not a violent breaking, but a willing exchange of life force. And if Lucien wasn't truly ready to give up his shadow for her light, the force of the release would destroy him utterly. Miranda turned back toward the king, now seeing him not as her captor or her savior, but as a gamble. She held the final decision. The power to transform a king or destroy him. Lucien remained in the deepest shadow of the citadel's ruins, healing slowly as Miranda's stable light, which no longer violently attacked him, but merely repelled him, washed over the ancient stones. She sat by the ancestral tablet, running her fingers over the carved glyphs, internalizing the fate laid out before them. She knew the shadow-packed artifact lay somewhere below them, radiating oppressive shadow, waiting to be shattered. Suddenly, a disturbance rippled through the light-drenched air. Lucien's head lifted, his gaze fixed on the only entry point. "They are here," he breathed, his voice low and dangerous. Valerius did not waste a moment. "He has mobilized the generals." Miranda rose, the sun rune on her chest pulsing softly. She walked to the crumbling battlement overlooking the mountain path. Below, gathered at the citadel's sun-bleached entrance, was a small but heavily armed contingent of the court's elite guard, armored in polished black steel. Leading them was Lord Valerius, accompanied by two of the most powerful, oldest vampire generals, General Volkov, a rigid military commander, and Mistress Lyra, the head of the court's arcane council. Valerius did not dare step onto the consecrated ground. He stood just at the line where the sun's influence began, shouting up the mountain path. "Lucien, King of Eldoria, we know you harbor the human anomaly." Valerius's voice was amplified by a minor spell, ringing across the ruin. "By the power vested in the Covenant, the court demands you surrender the Sun Seer immediately. Your reign is jeopardized." Lucien stepped out from the deep shadow, forcing himself into the periphery of the painful sunlight. He was shielded slightly by Miranda, whose stable presence seemed to dull the edge of the light's agony. He looked every inch the king from the image, regal, dominant, but now deeply exposed. "You are welcome to come and take her, Valerius," Lucien said, his voice carrying the same cold authority that had ruled the city for centuries. "But know that you step onto sacred ground, and you challenge your king's will." General Volkov, stern and unyielding, stepped forward, ignoring Valerius. "Sire, we are loyal to the Noctis crown, not to this madness. The bloodline of the Sunseers is a myth, a threat used to maintain peace. She must be a weapon created by our enemies. If she shatters the pact, the kingdom falls into chaos." "The kingdom already rests upon a lie, General," Lucien retorted, the sun rune's energy making the air around his words vibrate. "The pact was a curse disguised as power. It turned us into the very monsters we claimed to control." Mistress Lyra, her eyes glowing with arcane fervor, spoke next. "Lucien, you risked your essence by giving her your venom. You have already bonded your life force to hers. If she fails to control the sun rune during the ritual, your bond will amplify the destructive backlash. You will be annihilated, and the Noctis line will end." Miranda realized the generals weren't motivated by simple ambition like Valerius. They were terrified by the prospect of chaos and the extinction of their own species. They were offering Lucien a chance to retreat, to regain control, to surrender her and save his throne. Valerius, sensing the king's hesitation, stepped forward with the ultimatum. "We are not here for battle, king. We are here for justice. Surrender the girl, and the court will forgive this treason. If you do not, we will consider your protection of her a formal declaration of war against the Shadow Pact itself. Choose, Lucien. The girl or the crown." The silence that followed was immense, heavy with the weight of 500 years of history and the future of two species. Miranda watched Lucien. She saw the detachment, the carefully built emotional wall that was the true protection of the Shadow Pact. He could choose the crown, maintain order, and condemn her to death, the logical, kingly choice. Lucien looked from the pleading, fearful faces of his loyal generals to the smug, expectant face of Valerius. Then he looked at Miranda, whose hand was resting on the ancestral tablet that dictated his fate. She was terrifying, full of power, and wholly capable of destroying him. "You have forgotten one thing, Valerius," Lucien said, his voice ringing with a new, profound clarity that cut through the silence. "The king commands, he is not commanded. I have made my choice." He reached out and placed his hand on Miranda's shoulder. The silver light from her rune pulsed in defiant acceptance. "Miranda is the future of Eldoria. She will not be surrendered. Tell the court that the reign of the Shadow Pact is over." "This is not treason," Lucien declared, his voice a hammer blow. "This is war." Valerius's face contorted in frustrated rage. "Then you are no longer king. Prepare for war," he roared, whirling away, knowing the political gamble had failed, and now only force would prevail. The generals, faces pale, were dragged away in his wake, leaving Lucien and Miranda alone in the sun-drenched ruin to prepare for the inevitable assault. The citadel's ruins, once a sanctuary of light, now felt like a desperate fortress under siege. The shadows of the mountain passes held the gathering forces of the Obsidian Order and Lord Valerius's ambitious remnants, who were scaling the lower cliffs. They knew the king was weakened by the sun and trapped by his loyalty. Time was a luxury Lucien and Miranda no longer possessed. In the citadel's main chamber, where the ancestral tablet stood, Miranda was working. The sun, filtered through the shattered ceiling, bathed her in golden light, stabilizing the volatile power of the sun rune. She focused, trying to channel the searing energy into a cohesive form, as the tablet's message demanded. She threw her hands out, attempting to conjure a defensive shield. A blinding flash of light erupted, scorching the ancient stone floor, but it was erratic, a wild, unfocused discharge. The power was immense, but utterly untamed. The effort instantly drained her, leaving her panting, her skin slick with magical exhaustion. Lucien watched from the deepest recess of the nearest shadow, a frown etched into his face. He looked worse than he had since reaching the peak. The constant proximity to the purifying sun rune was a slow, agonizing poison to his shadowbound core. "You are forcing it," Lucien observed, his voice rough. "You channel the sun, yes, but you lack the anchor." The sun seers were meant to temper the light, not weaponize it blindly. "How can I temper it?" Miranda gasped, wiping sweat from her brow. "It feels like a wildfire, King. It wants to consume everything around me, including you." Lucien pushed himself away from the shadow, taking the painful step into the periphery of her light. "You are looking outside yourself." The tablet spoke of the blood accepting the light. "That means the anchor is not the sun, it is the bond we share." He slowly approached her, enduring the sting of the light. He placed his cold, beautiful hands on her shoulders. Miranda immediately tensed, the sun rune flaring in anxious response. "The venom I gave you," Lucien explained, his golden eyes locked on hers, "it did more than heal you. It infused your human heart with the essence of a Noctis King. It bonded our life forces. My Shadow Pact essence stabilizes your chaotic light. Your light purifies my shadow's emptiness." He urged her to focus, not on the sun pouring down, but on the profound, unnerving connection that existed between them, a mystical thread linking his ancient power to her newfound flame. "Channel your light into that thread, Miranda," he commanded. "Feed the venom in your veins. Make your sun rune draw strength from us." Miranda closed her eyes, pushing past the pain and the fear. She sought the thread. It was cold, deep, and lonely, but undeniably powerful, Lucien's essence. When she pushed her light into it, the contrast was agonizing, like oil and water being forced to mix. But then, the chaos subsided. The light settled, coalescing into a shimmering, perfect golden dome that enveloped her entirely. It was a flawless sun barrier, solid and pure. The energy no longer drained her, it flowed through her. "Yes," Lucien murmured, a flicker of genuine wonder in his eyes. "That is the strength of the Sun Seer. Untamed, it is a danger. Anchored to the Noctis King, it is balance." He removed his hands, and the light faded, leaving Miranda exhausted but not depleted. She had done it. She could control the power, but it relied entirely on the bond he had created. "If the pact is shattered," Miranda whispered, the reality of the ancestral tablet returning to her, "the bond, our shared essence, will be tested. It will be the ultimate confrontation between your shadow and my light." "Then let it be so," Lucien said, drawing his ceremonial sword. The blade, which had been smoking in her presence earlier, now felt cold and steady in his grip, its shadow essence stabilized by their successful bond. "We have the shield, but now we must prepare for the assault." Lucien guided her to the citadel's outer fortifications, pointing toward the winding mountain passes. "The Obsidian Order knows the sun will fade in the next few hours. They will push hard just before twilight, hoping to corner us when my strength is lowest and your light is beginning to wane." He showed her the weakest points in the ruinous walls, instructing her on where to focus her light to seal the breaches. He spoke with the clear, tactical mind of a general who had commanded armies for 5 centuries, yet his tone was now strangely personal, devoid of the cold detachment he had carried in the palace. "The core of the citadel, where the ancestral tablet stands, is directly above the chamber housing the pact artifact," he explained. "They will try to breach that chamber and destroy the pact themselves, believing it will destroy us both and restore their ancient ways." Miranda looked at him, fear replaced by a fierce resolve. "If they breach the core, I must use the sun barrier at maximum power." "You must," Lucien confirmed. "When the battle is lost and they corner us at the pact's location, you must unleash the full force of the rune into the artifact. It will not just destroy them. It will shatter the pact and force my transformation." He approached her, closing the final inch between them, and Miranda did not flinch. "I am gambling my existence on your courage, Miranda. I am trusting my future to the light I have always been forbidden to touch. Are you ready to risk your life to either transform a king or kill him?" Miranda reached out, and her hand, warm, human, and radiating powerful light, touched his cheek. "I ran from the world when I was weak," she said, her voice steady. "I won't run from my destiny when I am strong." The first distant sounds of conflict, the scrape of grapples on stone and the chilling, ecstatic cries of the Obsidian Order, echoed up the mountain path. Twilight was approaching, and the final battle for the soul of Eldoria had begun. The sun was sinking, casting long, bloody shadows across the citadel ruins. The Obsidian Order, driven by fanatical devotion to the Shadow Pact, launched their assault precisely as the light waned, the moment Lucien's strength was at its lowest ebb. They came not with military precision, but with the savage ferocity of zealots. Led by the furious Lord Valerius, who used ancient, dark spells to temporarily shield his group from the residual light, they swarmed the outer walls. Miranda, standing at the crumbling breach, acted instantly. She focused on the cold thread of Lucien's essence within her, drawing stability from their bond, and unleashed a massive sun barrier. It wasn't the chaotic discharge of Chapter 2, but a perfect, shimmering dome of golden light that sealed the breach and sent the first wave of assassins recoiling with shrieks. The Obsidian Order's dark armor smoked where the light touched it. Lucien fought beside her, his movements fluid and deadly, dispatching any vampire that managed to penetrate the barrier's fringe. But the twilight was his enemy. With every passing moment, the sun's retreat amplified the curse of the Shadow Pact, making him sluggish and vulnerable. "They're bypassing us," Lucien roared, recognizing the Order's true intent. "They are not trying to fight through the barrier. They are breaching the floor." Valerius, having studied the Citadel's blueprints, knew the Pact artifact lay directly beneath the central chamber. He was using concentrated shadow magic to bore a hole through the floor of the ancestral tablet room. "To the core," Lucien commanded, pulling Miranda back toward the tablet. His exhaustion was palpable, his usual commanding posture was bowed, his breath shallow. The Shadow Pact was claiming him. They reached the central chamber just as the stone floor groaned and gave way in a cloud of dust and pulverized rock. Valerius and the remaining Obsidian Order warriors erupted from the hole, their eyes burning with manic fervor. Below them, visible through the shattered floor, was the colossal Pact artifact, a towering, monstrous obelisk of dull, light-absorbing obsidian, radiating absolute emptiness. "Now, King, you see the consequence of weakness," Valerius shrieked, his face triumphant. "I will not let this kingdom fall to your sentimentality. We will destroy the human ourselves, and then return the Noctis line to its true, eternal darkness." Valerius lunged, not for Miranda, but for Lucien, wielding a long, ritualistic knife forged from shadow-infused iron, a material designed to penetrate and poison a king's essence. Lucien managed to block the initial strike with his sword, but the exchange was too slow. Valerius feinted, then drove the iron blade deep into Lucien's side. A gasp tore from Lucien's throat. Dark, smoky blood pulsed from the wound. The shadow iron instantly began to neutralize the purified venom in his system, paralyzing his movements and amplifying the Shadow Pact's curse. He fell to one knee, powerless, the cold detachment of the Pact rushing back over him like a suffocating shroud. Miranda screamed his name, but the Obsidian Order was upon her, their daggers raised. She threw out a defensive blast of light, repelling them momentarily, but she knew she couldn't hold them, not with Lucien failing. She looked at the wounded king, seeing the life and warmth he had briefly cultivated flicker and die behind his eyes, replaced by the ancient, empty glaze of the Pact. He was being reclaimed by the shadow. She glanced down at the hole, at the Obsidian Pact artifact waiting below, and then at the ancestral tablet, remembering the final phrase, "To shatter the cage, blood must accept the light." It was time for the final, irreversible gamble. Miranda rushed forward, bypassing the struggling Obsidian warriors. She didn't use her light as a weapon, she used it as a key. She threw herself onto Lucien, seizing his face in her hands. Her sun rune was now burning with the full, concentrated power of the fading sunlight, blindingly bright. "The bond," she cried, pouring every ounce of her life force, her son's seared destiny, and the power of the light into the point where his wound bled, directly into his contaminated Noctis essence. The effect was instantaneous and violent. The surge of pure light through their shared life essence hit the oppressive, empty core of the Shadow Pact artifact below like a magical supernova. Miranda held the kiss, pouring her light into his shadow-poisoned wound. Valerius and the remaining Obsidian Order looked on in horror as a deafening, echoing crack sounded from the depths of the citadel. The Obsidian artifact, the anchor of the 1,000-year-old curse, shattered into a billion black, smoking fragments. The magical backlash was absolute. The sun rune's energy, coupled with the collapsing Shadow Pact, detonated. A wave of purifying, blinding golden light erupted from the hole, engulfing the entire chamber. Valerius and the Obsidian Order warriors, who had devoted their existence to darkness, were instantly vaporized, consumed by the pure light they had feared and fought against. Miranda fell back, momentarily blinded and exhausted, her power spent. She shielded her eyes. When the light faded, the citadel was silent. Valerius and the Obsidian Order were gone. Only Lucian remained, kneeling where the pact had died. He was still breathing, but he was no longer the King of Shadows. His dark, cold form began to subtly transform. The Shadow Pact's oppression lifted, and the light he had feared rushed in, not to destroy, but to integrate. The smoky wound healed instantly, leaving behind a faint, silver-gold scar. His midnight black hair developed streaks of ethereal, shimmering silver, and his skin took on a luminous quality, glowing with internalized light. His golden eyes, once cold and calculating, now burned with a brilliant, silver fire, the color of true dawn. The king had not died. He had been reborn. The transformation was complete. A profound, ethereal silence settled over the ancient citadel, broken only by the shifting dust that had once been the Obsidian Order. The air was no longer heavy with ancient shadow or chaotic light, but balanced, a cool, crisp atmosphere that felt like the beginning of the world. Miranda slowly opened her eyes. The pain was gone, replaced by an invigorating hum that resonated with the silence of the ruins. She looked down at Lucian, who was still kneeling, but no longer wounded, no longer bound. His dark armor and cloak seemed to absorb and radiate light simultaneously. The shadow of the Noctis line remained, granting him strength, but it was now tempered by the purity of the Sun Rune's magic he had absorbed. He stood, his movements fluid, his silver-gold eyes sweeping over the remnants of the shattered pact artifact. He was a perfect duality, a king of both shadow and sun. Lucian took a breath, a full, deep, humanizing breath he hadn't taken in 1,000 years. His lips curved into a slow, unfamiliar smile, not the practiced sneer of the Shadow Pact, but an expression of profound, rediscovered emotion. "The cage is broken," he said, his voice deeper, richer, resonating with an authority that transcended mere power. "I am unbound." He walked to the large hole in the floor, where the pact artifact had stood, and looked out across the mountain range. He knew the remaining forces of the court were still scattered across the mountain, terrified, confused, and leaderless without Valerius or the Obsidian Order. Valerius made his choice, and now he faces the ultimate exile, Lucian declared. Those who remain, those who cling to the fear and the emptiness of the Shadow Pact, will be given one chance to swear allegiance to the new order. Those who refuse will be cast out beyond the twilight borders, to wander without purpose or kingdom. He turned back to Miranda, his gaze gentle but absolute. "You risked your life to break the prison I was too detached to see. That gamble changed everything. The loneliness of my 5 centuries is over." Miranda stepped toward him, placing her hand gently on the glowing silver streak in his hair. "I didn't do it to rule. I did it because your curse was destroying you. And you succeeded in more than you know." He pulled her close, the light in her essence no longer burning him, but warming him to his core. 6 months later, the shockwave of the king's transformation had rippled through Eldoria like an earthquake. The citadel was no longer a ruin, it had become the cornerstone of the new kingdom. Human and vampire artisans worked side by side to restore the ancient walls, integrating light-gathering glass ceilings and sun-drenched gardens where the old, suffocating shadow had dominated. The citadel was reborn as a sanctuary and a university, where the remaining Noctis vampires, now free of the Shadow Pact's curse, learned to endure and integrate the light, and where humans learned the long-forgotten secrets of the Sun Seers. Miranda stood on the highest tower, dressed in robes of silver and white that proclaimed her new role. The sun rune now glowed faintly, a permanent, powerful badge on her collarbone. She was the Sun Seer Queen, the living proof that the two species could coexist and thrive. Below, in the massive courtyard, a gathering of nobles, some still wary, but all now obedient, listened as Lucian, the king of light and shadow, delivered his first edict. He decreed the end of the strict separation, outlawed all forms of human trafficking, and established a council of both species to govern the city. Lucian approached Miranda, his ethereal presence commanding attention even as he moved with quiet ease. "The foundations are set," he murmured, his gaze resting on her. "They still fear what they don't understand, but they obey." They saw the shadow pact shatter, and they saw what was born in its place. Miranda leaned against him, watching the sun begin its ascent, a sight neither of them had ever fully appreciated before. "But did we truly end the conflict?" Miranda asked quietly. "There are still pockets of resistance, those who fled to the darkness." "We ended the source of the conflict," Lucian corrected, placing his hand over her own, their dual essences, light and shadow, meeting in perfect harmony. "The pact bound us all to fear and hatred. Without it, the fear is only a habit, and habits can be broken." He paused, turning his silver-gold gaze to her. "You asked me in the tunnels why I risked everything for you that first night, before I knew of the prophecies or the runes. Before I knew what you were." Miranda nodded, the memory of his cold detachment in the alley still vivid. Lucian's smile was warm, genuine, and profoundly emotional, a luxury denied to him for a millennium. "When I found you, dying and abandoned in that alley, I saw the epitome of the misery I had ruled over, the misery the shadow pact perpetuated. I was compelled, not by destiny, but by a flicker of what I used to be, a king who needed to save someone to prove his own existence had value." He pressed his forehead gently against hers. "It wasn't you who needed saving, Miranda. It was me. You were the light that accepted my shadow, and in doing so, you saved my soul." The morning sun crested the horizon, bathing the entire citadel in a fierce, golden light. Lucian stepped forward, fully into the sun, which kissed his skin without burning. Below them, Eldoria awakened. For the first time in 1,000 years, a new era had dawned, the shocking, hopeful reign of the King of Light and Shadow and his son's seer queen.